Today, our guest is a Myrtle Beach restaurateur, author, and legend, Dino Thompson. Welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to have you today. Dino and his partner opened Cagney's old place, I believe, Dino, 1976. And correct me if I'm wrong, operated till 2012, that restaurant. I read you served nearly 3 million guests there.
Yeah, a little over.
A little over 3 million guests. And then Dino and his partner Dino still operate Flamingo Grill, which opened in 86 right here on 71st Avenue. So we're just glad to have you and kind of catch up and learn a little bit about not only your path, Dino, but really Myrtle Beach's path. I mean, you are a true local. Tell us a little bit about your background. I mean, obviously restaurants have been your life, but there's another side of Dino that a lot of people don't know. When it comes to some of your other interests. I mean, you're an author, which we'll get into in a minute. But tell us a little bit about your background and the story of how you and your family got to Myrtle Beach. It's a fascinating story.
Well, my dad, he met my mom in 40, and they met. He was living in New York. He came to America in 1929. Yeah. He was living in Astoria, New York, which was a big Greek community at the time. And Mom was living nearby in New Jersey. And she and her 4 brothers and 3 sisters went to the New Year's Eve florist ball at the Waldorf Astoria. And Dad went. And he saw Mom from a distance, tried to get to her. But back then, you couldn't break through the sisters and brothers to get to her. But he found out who she was. And they courted for 2.5 years and got married. And when the war broke out, the Nazis invaded Greece. He joined the army. Okay. And interestingly enough, I didn't know this went on in the army, but they sent him to Camp Carson, Colorado, to train in the mountains. And the entire battalion was Greek. And they were training them to drop them behind the lines because the Nazis had now occupied Greece to join the guerrillas. There was a large resistance in the mountains fighting the Nazis. And so when it came time to graduate, they asked for volunteers. Everybody volunteered, and then they asked who was married. And Dad was married, so he didn't go because they knew it was going to be 90% casualty rate, which it was. So he was lucky that he didn't go. But he went to Europe and fought in Italy and came back. And after the war, he moved to Newport News. He got a job at the shipyards. Okay. And then 46 or so, they closed the shipyards. And 40,000 people were let go. So they packed everything up in a 40 LaSalle, me in a bassinet in the back, and off to Florida they went. And back then there was no 95. There was 301, and it wasn't finished. Okay. And you had to get off somewhere above Wilmington, right, on U.S. Highway 17, which is our main
Heard of that
yeah.
one.
It was called Ocean Highway 17. And it was a 2-lane road. Not all of it was paved. And they stopped in the middle of downtown Myrtle Beach. It was only about 3 blocks wide. And at a little place called the Cozy Corner Cafe. Yeah. It was in October. No business back then. Back then, old-timers will tell you, like, Labor Day, it didn't slow down, it stopped. Right. I mean, it literally stopped. So how many people you had in the restaurant back then was some local coffee drinkers, or somebody might be eating breakfast, but there weren't many people. When we stopped in 46, I think there was 1,300 people in Myrtle Beach. That was the population. Yeah. And there was a Greek run the place named Tom Haley, and I later got to know him well, and his 2 sons and his daughter. But he was interesting. He spoke perfect Greek, but he grew up in Charleston. He had a real Geechee accent. Yeah. And it was always interesting to hear him speak Greek because he talked Gullah Greek.
I've never thought that was possible.
Yeah. But he was a sharp dresser. He wore French cuffs and, and pin tie. And spats. He wore those white and black shoes.
Yeah.
And he was a sharp dude, a lot faster talker than my old man, who was a really laid back guy.
Yeah.
And they started yapping, and Dad said, "We're going to Florida to find a life, find a business." And he said, "Well, this place is for sale. It's ready to go. I can sell you the lease on this place." And within 2 hours, Dad had made a deal. They had shook hands. He got a big A&P bag and put some papers in it.
That's a grocery store for those that don't know what A&P is.
Yeah, that was our only grocery store back then. Later, we had Piggly Wiggly, and they were the only two.
Okay.
But he dumped some papers, a 25 automatic, and dumped the cash drawer in there, folded it up, and shook Dad's hand and said, "Good luck." They passed $3,200 cash. And back then, you didn't need a lawyer. You just shook hands.
Wow.
And along with the lease, we found out that the apartment on top went with it. There's 8 apartments up there.
Oh.
And they're still there.
Right.
In downtown Myrtle Beach.
I believe Winna's Kitchen currently occupies where Cozy Corner is. Yes.
And I think the mayor just bought that building. Brenda Bethune just bought it, didn't she?
Okay.
Anyway, and so within 2 hours, Mom's up there scrubbing the place with Ajax, and Dad's introducing himself to the cooks. So 2 hours after we stopped, we're in business, and we're moving in. That's where I grew up.
How long? I knew that story, and it's still amazing. Did you imagine, pulling over and you're just taking a bathroom break, and then 2 hours later, you're cleaning your new business?
Yeah.
How long did you live above the Cozy Corner?
Until I was 14.
Oh, wow. So y'all were there for, 13 years.
I was almost 14,
I have all these questions to ask you, but we're flowing in. Tell us about your childhood growing up above the Cozy Corner, looking over. I'm imagining the pavilions there.
Yeah.
What was childhood like in the late 40s, 50s? Let's talk about that.
Well, it was a simpler, gentler time. Drugs didn't exist. So children wandered everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, by the time I was 4 or 5, I was wandering everywhere. They were always looking for me. And at night, there was a beat cop named Bert Chestnut who would actually knew all my hiding places. He would find me and pick me up by the back of the pants sometime and bring me back to the restaurant. But, nowadays that seems preposterous to let your children run.
Sure.
But Dad always thought I had good sense even when I was tiny. But growing up there was like paradise. I look out my window and I saw the amusement park, the ocean. 9th Avenue was here. Right. 8th Avenue was there. So I could look down on the street, and we had no air conditioning, so the windows were always open. So we fell asleep to the sound of music. The jukebox was going, the roller coaster was going, that old organ was playing, kids were squealing, and that's what we fell asleep to every night.
So, Dino, tell me, just growing up, watching your father, I mean, literally above the restaurant, you lived up there, you're watching your mom and dad run the restaurant.
18 hours a day.
All the time. It's a consuming thing. And then fast forward, you're in the restaurant business, basically your whole professional life. I know you did some other things, but that was the primary business. Let's talk about Tony in particular, your dad. How did he influence or impact? How did he put his stamp on you as a person, as a man, personally and professionally?
The way he treated me was very unusual. He'd let me make mistakes, and he would just smile and say, "Son, think about that. What'd you do? Think about it. Was there a better way to do that?" And sometimes he would give me a Greek mythology story, and I didn't know what the heck he was talking about, but after I would think about it sometime, it related to what I had done, but he had all these Greek cynic philosophers he could rely on to tell me a story. He loved Diogenes and he loved Pythagoras, but he knew, he was one of the most well-read men I've ever known. When he was a peasant, came from Cyprus, but he read everything.
Yeah.
He read history books. And so he had an extremely good memory, which he imparted to me.
Yeah.
I have a ridiculously good memory. And that was him. He gave that to me. But he was just patient with me. He just...
When you think through your father professionally, I imagine work ethic. What are some things that you saw that you say, hey, this helped me in my career, in my business, maybe my leadership?
Well, he got up 5:30 in the morning. They open up at 6 and they close at 12. And that's what they did.
12 midnight?
Yeah.
Midnight?
6 in the morning till 12.
Wow.
That was the shift, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Now everybody specializes,
Right.
most people. But back then, he had a menu that I couldn't possibly serve at any of my restaurants, twice as big as any menu I've ever had. I don't know how. In the kitchen is 1/5 the size of the kitchen we had. I don't know how they got the food out, but we did.
Right.
And of course, she worked. My mother worked alongside my dad.
Yeah.
She did everything. So you learn a work ethic by watching them. They do anything and everything, and that's the way I did it.
Right.
You go clean a bathroom, you sweep, you bus a table, you help the dishwasher. And I still do that.
Most people don't know this, but I had the good fortune of working for Dino and Dino at Cagney's. You hired me in 85. I was 15. I think that's right. It might have been 87. I can't remember. And I worked for 5 years off and on, summers, sometimes during school, but most of the time I was away at college. And I got to watch you, the way you, and I don't want to, floating is the wrong word, but just the effortless way you would move about the dining room, greeting guests, going up to tables. It was really, I never thought of it at the moment, but looking back, it was such a wonderful way of just serving. And as a host, I don't know, everyone felt very comfortable there. Did you see, I can just imagine you watching your father greet his guest. Was that his style, or was he more behind the scenes? Like in the kitchen kind of?
He was gregarious.
Okay.
He's like me, loved to tell a story. Yeah. But he was in the kitchen when he needed to be. Yeah. Like, I've cooked. Yeah, I've washed more dishes than any of my dishwashers. So. And, back in the day, there was no OSHA, so I'd be on 3 Coca-Cola crates. They showed me how to operate a bandsaw. I would cut whole chicken when I was 8, 9 years old.
Oh, wow. I was
cutting chickens or bone-in prime rib on a bandsaw with no guard.
Gosh.
Nowadays, you get locked up for that. You can't do it. But that was the times. And once they showed you how to do it, they thought you'd be careful, not cut your hand off.
Right. What was the inspiration with Greek Boy? It is a Myrtle Beach memoir. It's got so many stories. Why did you do that? I think I heard a little bit about something that had to do with your dad and memory. Can you piece that together, the inspiration behind the book?
My dad hit his mid or late 80s. Like I told you, he had a ridiculously detailed memory. And Susan and I would go over to their house, every Sunday. Mom would cook a beautiful Greek dinner.
Nice.
And Dad would always tell a few stories, but he told the story of how he came to Myrtle Beach that I told earlier.
Yes.
And he confused the people, the names, some of the times. And I remember I said, Dad, Susan's heard that story many times, so have I. And Susan kicked me under the table. That was rude for me to say that. I just didn't want to hear him saying it wrong.
Yeah.
But Dad looked at me and he realized he was confused. And he smiled and he said, son, I want to tell a story. And that's the only one that's in here right now. So I'm going to tell it. And I said, go ahead, Dad. And he told it and he confused it.
Yeah.
And it made me sad. I went home. I got a notepad with lined paper, number 2 pencil, and I wrote it as detailed as I remember him telling me on his best day, which is essentially the first 6, 7, 8 pages of the book. And it was about 20 pages, handwritten.
Yeah.
And I put it in one of those blue books we used to turn into school.
Right.
And I put a photograph in there of the day we arrived in Myrtle Beach. Mom getting out of the car, and Dad took a little brownie snapshot of Mom holding me. And that was the day we arrived. So I have that
Great
picture.
shot, yeah.
I have that picture in the book. And I put that in there and I gave it to Dad. He read it. He laughed. He loved it. And he'd say, son, write some more. So I go home, I'd think of another story that had to do with Mom and Dad or us. Another blue book, another photograph. And I did this for about 3.5 years. And I had about 200 pages, handwritten, about 15, 20 blue books. And Dad died. He died in his home, sitting in his chair, Christmas morning. And what's interesting about him, he and I grew up and we were kind of pat each other on the back, give each other a hug. But we never, ever said, I love you. It was just the way we were.
Yeah.
I thought I was a tough kid. I just never said it.
Yeah.
And he was not brought up that way either. So Mom told me about 200 times a week, wore me out with it. But they came now, I just built a house in Briarcliff, and they came to the house. It was raining that night. It was moving really slow. He was 90. We got him up the steps. He sat down. He looked around. He said, it's nice, son. That's all he said. And that night, we're taking him back to the house. I had an umbrella. Susan had an umbrella, and she's taking Mom. I'm taking Dad. I got him in the car. Got ready to shut the door, and I said, I love you, Dad. And he says, thank you, son. Oh. And that was it. And next morning he died. And I remember I was walking back to the house and Susan said, I've never heard you tell your dad you love him. And I said, no, I never have. So that's the last thing he ever heard. Wow. Which was that's amazing. Still a good, warm, fuzzy feeling for me.
You bet. Yeah.
But he was the happiest man I ever knew every day. And he didn't have a lot, but we always had a restaurant, plenty to eat. Yeah. Either an apartment. Later, we had a house. When I was 14, 15, we bought a house.
Where was that first one? South Myrtle?
A sophomore. It was on 44th Avenue.
Oh, east of 17? Or the other side?
Like it was east.
Yeah. Nice.
Jimmy Ward lives right across the street.
Yes.
Yeah, right across the street.
Okay.
The Wards lived in that big lot there. And we didn't know Mom had bought a house. Dad would never have bought a house. He grew up 7 people in a little block house with his mom and dad in Cyprus. He was happy. He'd be happy sitting on a rock eating a turnip. He just was the most content human being I ever knew.
Wow.
He never needed anything. Mm-hmm. So anyway, Mom comes home one day and says she bought a house. Dad goes, where? And she says, I'll take you and show you. So she took it. I was excited. I never had a house. Yeah. Had grass, a little yard. Yeah. So I thought I was always envious of my friends when I went and spent a night with them. They had a house, But I still loved being downtown. It was great. I went to we call it the Pavilion, the Pavilion. And, you learn to dance. You hang around cute girls everywhere. So I love being down there. And, walking the beach during the day, at night. Yeah. I'd get off work. We'd run. We'd ride the floats. Yeah. Those scratchy floats.
I want to come back to the dancing. I want to come back to that because there's a story of your uncle who was quite the dancer, the champion. But tell me, so your dad stops on a bathroom break to Florida and buys a business in about 30 minutes. And then your mom, he can't complain because Mom bought a house without telling him. It kind of like evened out there. So overall, he was pleased with the home and he was happy.
Yeah, I mean, he would have been happy without it or with it.
Right. But Mama was happy now.
Mama was very happy. She always wanted a house.
Sure.
And she actually went to Hickory and bought all the furniture. We didn't know that.
Yeah.
And we later found out she was skimming money we had leased 3 restaurants. She was skimming money from the restaurants.
Wait a minute. The truth is coming out. You're telling your mother skimmed money?
Well, she had to buy the furniture and she didn't tell us. And we just thought, well, furniture came with the house. But it was Some of it was special made furniture,
Yeah.
you know, from hickory. And it was really decorated nice. Mom had good taste. And I remember she had a big white sofa. It was silk embroidered, and we weren't allowed to sit in there.
Right. We all had one of those.
Yeah.
Grandma's.
Dad, you know, he was a peasant from Cyprus. He said, "What do you mean we can't go in there?" He says, we'll sit in this part, in the den. But he used to laugh about that. He says, we have a room. He would tell people, we have a room nobody's allowed to go in. So we look at it occasionally. I go in and look at it.
Oh, that's funny.
So one day, he was a practical joker. He comes out the shower. He's naked. He's dripping wet. And she said, what are you doing? He said, I'm going to take a nap on that white couch. And she's screaming at him the whole way. And he goes and lays down on the white couch.
He did?
Yeah. And he's soaking into it. And my mom yells about 9 adjectives about the couch. It says French, provincial, silk, embroidered, something else. And we're all laughing. And she says something about $1,100.
Oh, my.
Well, you know, the car I was driving cost $1,200.
Yeah.
Dad had a Jeep that cost $1,000. Mom had a car. So we stopped laughing immediately, and Dad says, what cost? A couch cost $1,100? And it was an oversized
Oh, he
couch.
must have lost it.
And she knew she had blown her cover, and she said, no, everything in here cost $1,100. And he picks up this big ornamental ashtray and holds it over this nice coffee table. He said, how much is this coffee table? And he's got the ashtray. And she said, I don't know. But Mom, she knew numbers good. She was great with numbers. He said, I'm going to smash this in 5 seconds. And she said, the ashtray's $30, and that's $325. He set it down, and he looked at me, and he said, son, go get a piece of paper. I went and got a piece of paper. And after we got to about $6,000, he said, stop. We know where the thief is now. She's living with us.
So he knew there was some missing money.
Yeah.
And this is in 1960-ish. 62. Okay.
62.
But think about how much
We at
$1,100 is for a couch in 1962. And yeah.
It's a lot now.
Yeah, it is.
It is for $1,100.
Yeah.
Mom went to Hickory, and she had this special made couch.
Goodness.
She had a dining room set that had our initials on the chairs. It's like we didn't even notice.
Yeah.
You know, we just went home.
Well, because your dad was working 18 hours a day.
Yeah, that's right.
You know?
So Mom had never had anything nice, and
Right.
she kind of overdid it. But all's forgiven.
Yeah.
And we enjoyed the house for years.
You lost your mother after Tony, right? Did she
She
pass?
lived another 12, 13 years.
Oh, okay.
She died at 96,
Wow.
and we thought she was 92. But she lied to me and Dad all of her life.
What?
She, when she met Dad, she was 25. And back in 1940, you were over the hill.
Oh, yeah.
Girls were over the hill marrying-wise. So she became 21 immediately, and she never changed.
That's amazing.
And the only reason I found out is after she died, I sold the house, and I took her Bible home. She used to read her Bible every night, and she'd underline. So I opened it up. I wanted to see what she was underlining, what she thought was important. And her passport fell out. 16 years old, cute little picture of her coming to America. And I thought, wow, I've never seen this. And then I looked at the date, and I thought, this is wrong.
Right.
And I thought, that can't be wrong. This is her original passport. And then I just started laughing. I said, you got the last laugh on me and Dad.
That is great.
Yeah, I thought she was 92. I actually put that in her obituary when I wrote it.
Put the real
No, I put 92 because it was months later
that you found it.
That I found the Bible.
So did that make her, was she the same age? Was she like a year older than him?
She was 7 years younger, but Dad thought he was 11 years older.
Okay.
She was younger.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. She was a hard-working woman. She worked hard all her life.
Yeah.
And she deserved to have a beautiful couch.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the least they could have. Your uncle was a champion, and he told you, he gave you some advice early on that you took to heart. And tell us about that.
He was the epitome of cool.
Okay.
I have a couple pictures in there, but he used to work. My father, he's the only man in the world whose wife gave his mother-in-law money to open up a restaurant right across the street.
Wow.
So where the Colonial building used to be,
Yes.
that was the Colonial Cafe. Mom brings her mother down, gives her several $1,000s that she'd squirreled from us to open that restaurant up. And she lived on top with her mom's youngest brother. And that was Nicky. That was the cool jitterbug.
Right.
He was older than me. And he taught me to boogie. He used to buy tailor-made pants from this Armenian tailor with the buttons on the side and the whelps on the side, a pocket for your comb. They were cool. They were pegged. And they had certain dimensions, 14 inches for the cuff and 34 for the thigh. I mean, they had specific dimensions. And they were called drapes. Some people called them drapes because they kind of draped. And but they were the original peg pants. And he had a kind of a zoot jacket that he used to wear for, for parties.
Right.
And he was a cat. He was a jitterbug cat.
Right.
Now, if you were a jitterbug cat with no money, you were a moocher, and you could be arrested. Back in the day, if you didn't have $5, they could arrest you for vagrancy. And they did. Okay. And that was one of the ways they kept unwanted people from hanging around Myrtle Beach. Because there was a lot of moochers back in the day.
Yeah.
They would just hang around and hit you up for a quarter or a cigarette or a hamburger. Right. And but Nicky was a really good dancer. He would come and help us at the restaurant sometime. We had a hat rack in between the booths that was welded to the booths. He would hold on to that and do his dance steps.
Oh, yeah.
And one of his girlfriends was a Myrtle Beach girl named Rosemary, great dancer. And his other girlfriend was Vanna White's mom, Joan Nichols.
Okay.
And she lived in Ocean Drive.
Right.
She worked at a curb hop place where you, on roller skates, and you rolled up to your car and took the order. They brought you a tray they'd hooked to the side of the window. Yeah.
For my younger listeners, watch a rerun of Happy Days.
There you go.
Would it be
That's exactly that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. YouTube.
Exactly. And Cozy Corner looked like the restaurant in the Happy Days.
Okay.
But he was the 1953 Jitterbug champion. They went to Columbia and won the contest there. He had about a 2.5-foot trophy.
What was his advice to you, though, about how to get some girls?
Well, he used to take, sometime I'd follow him down there and he'd hang around and he'd always tell me, if I'm not here, he could fight. He knew how to fight. He taught me how to fight too. Wow. But he said, if I'm not here, you run to him. He pointed at Whitey Stevens, who carried a switchblade, and he pointed to Maurice, who was one of the best bare-knuckle fighters ever. He had won 3 years in a row the National Golden Glove champion, lightweight championship. And he was only 140 pounds, but he could knock anybody out because he could hit them 20 times.
Local guy here, Myrtle Beach guy.
Yes, and he's quite a legend in his fighting. Now, if you met him when he was 60, he used to come in the restaurant. He's my size.
Right.
And he's pleasant. He and his wife were, sweet people. And I used to look at him and think, my God, if people knew the hell this man caused on the boulevard, because he would walk up to a guy with an Ohio State jersey on that weighed 235, and he would just get in his face. But that was the era.
I understand.
And Nicky told me one day there was a crowd of 1,500, 2,000 people watching the Jitterbugs. Now, the Jitterbugs, might be 8, 9, 10 of them that had the peg pants and the collars up, skinny belts, and that's why I still do it. And he said, see that cute girl over there? And he pointed out about 6 cute girls. If if you could dance. Doesn't matter. He said, if you got a hole in the top of your head or a horn sticking out of your head, they'll dance with you. If you go to ask them if they can see you can dance. So that immediately told me, you got to learn to dance. That's how you got a girl back then.
Which you did, apparently.
Which you did,
Okay.
yeah. That was important.
I want to go back. It's 1968 when you land the deal to the land on what is now called Restaurant Row. I think it's still called that. That's what I call it, Chestnut Hill. Tell us how you chose that location, because I've got to imagine 68, there can't be much there. And so
no, there's nothing there.
I want to know how you picked restaurant. Yeah. Why did you pick that area? And then obviously you didn't open for like 6 or 7 years. So tell us a little bit of that journey to open Cagney's. And that's
well, I opened the first pancake house in Myrtle Beach.
Okay.
While I was in college, 66.
Dino's Pancakes.
Yeah, because there wasn't one. I went to Atlanta and I saw an IHOP and I thought, wow. This thing's got 25 kinds of pancakes, you know. Myrtle Beach didn't have that. Everything was 3-meal restaurants. You know? So I looked into IHOP's $35,000 franchise fee.
Wow.
A lot of money.
Back then, that much.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So I proofed that one. So I said, well, I'll draw my own. So I drew that restaurant and we opened in 66 while I was in college. And I'd come every other weekend. I'd drive, work as much as I could. Mom and Dad were working hard in there. And then I decided I wanted to do a nighttime place. And so I was drawing restaurants. When I had nothing to do, I'd draw layouts all the time. So I had Cagney's pretty well laid out at one time, but I needed a piece of property. So I remember I went down where Hurl Rock Beach is, where Damon's is, and I tried to lease that.
That particular site?
Yeah, from Mr. Burroughs, the old man Burroughs. And he smiled. You know, I was only 19, and he smiled, and he said, son, I like the way you're thinking, but we don't want to lease that piece of property. We're going to keep it. And so then I went to Merle's Inlet, and I looked at the marsh, but that was way too far. I didn't want to drive that far, you know. I wanted to be near it. So where Cagney's was, you could see it a mile either way. It was right on the bend.
Right.
You can't see it now because there's 70 businesses around it. But I thought, wow, there's nothing there. So it took me a while to find out. I had to go ask Mr. Chestnut. The only things up there were the 5 Chestnut houses.
Right.
You know, and they all had 200-300 acres, you know.
Yeah.
And they owned the whole area. So I asked Stokes Chestnut, who owned that. He told me. They lived up in Little River. They had a little teeny apartment. And they had a grocerette underneath. And they had a little farm on 90. Well, that farm, when they cut the waterway, cut a little sliver off of their farm. And that was that little sliver. So that sliver was worthless to them. They couldn't farm it.
Gotcha.
So anyway, I finally found out who owned it. And I went up there, and his wife told me, he don't want to sell no property. He don't sell no property. A lot of farmers,
that's right.
They never sell their property.
That's right.
I said, well, ma'am, I'm not going to. He said, he doesn't run off a lot of people. I said, I'm not pushy. I'm just going to ask him one time. And if he says no, I will never bother you or your husband. But I couldn't get to him. And so she kind of got to liking me. She felt sorry for me. And she said, he ain't in a good mood. Don't come up here. Well, he was never in a good mood.
Okay.
So I remember about the 11th time, she said, he's laughing about the election.
Come on.
A fellow named Duro Cook that everybody knew he was a crazy guy. He ran for state senator. He ran for everything. And now he's running for president. So they were laughing about that. I said, he's laughing? I said, yeah. So it's 20 miles. So I jumped and I had a little MG and I haul buggied up there. And when I got there, he was gone. I said, well, where is he? He said, he's slopping the hogs. And I said, well, where are the hogs? And she said, well, they're on 90. And he's got a red truck. So I drove down 90. She said it was 3 miles. I drive down. And
Did you have GPS back then?
Oh, no.
No, I know.
You kidding? I didn't even own a phone now.
Hey, guys, folks, don't miss that. Dino Thompson has never owned a cell phone, and I'm probably going to verify that with his wife, Susan, but I believe he's definitely telling me the truth. All right, please continue on the
Well,
pig.
she bought me a flip phone, but I never took it.
Okay.
It stayed in the drawer.
Okay.
But anyway, I see him, and he's in the middle of a pig field with about 300 pigs. It's a big herd. So I got a pair of Cohan loafers on.
Oh, gosh.
And I step over the hot wire fence, and I immediately lose one of my shoes, because it's about that thick, deep. And I find it and I put it on. That happened about 5 times. And he's a stout man. He's about 220 pounds. He's about 5'7" or 8. He's just a stump of a man, powerful man. And he's picking these 100-pound bags of feed up, putting them on his shoulder. And he's got about a 50-foot trough. And he's got this big buck knife, and he's cutting them open, and he's pouring it in this trough. And I'm standing in the middle of this field for about 20 minutes, and he absolutely ignores me. So he's working hard. I don't want to interrupt him. So I thought, I'll help.
Okay.
So I go over, I weigh 155 pounds. I go over and I grab one of these bags. Well, I can't do anything with it.
Right.
So I drag it. I get it up to the trough, and it's got this thick cord, and I'm trying to pull it apart. All of a sudden, this big buck knife sticks into the bag, and he says, "Use that there." I said, "Thank you, sir." So I cut the bag open.
There's no hello yet.
Nothing.
Just
use that there.
Okay.
So I pick the bag up kind of in the middle, and of course, I dump about 40 pounds of feed in the mud before I get it to its trough. And he walks over and he goes, "Stop. Don't help me no more." I said, "I'm sorry, sir." And I stood up, and he said, "What do you want?" I said, "Well, I'm interested in that property on the bend." I said, "Are you interested in selling it?" And he's a man that bears you down. He never looks away. Not everybody does that, but he never looks away. And he says, "No." And he just keeps looking at me, and I'm waiting on him to say, "But I'll do this." But he just says no. And I said, "Well, would you lease it?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, what do you think you need to get for it?" I had no idea what property's worth up there, or hardly anywhere.
Right.
But I thought if he said this, I'd say this, and maybe we'd end up somewhere. And he said, "I ain't got all day. Make me an offer." Now
he's put it back to you.
I'm 20 at the time. And I said, "Sir, I'm not sure." He said, "I ain't got all day." So I just said something that came out of my mouth, and he said, "Fair enough. Bring me 2 pieces of paper," and starts walking away in his big rubber boots. And I'm following him. I lost my shoes 3 more times. I said, "Sir, 2 pieces of paper," and he stops, and he said, "Yeah, don't bring me no book to read. 2 pieces of paper." So he wanted a lease with 2 pieces of paper.
Just a simple lease.
So I go home and I write, and I think I need a book. So I go by Skeet spelling me. They're too busy to talk to me. I'm nobody. So I see a little sign hanging crooked, says Harry Pavelak.
Oh, gosh.
And it's hanging, one of the hooks is off. So I thought, it's a tiny little place right in the middle of town. So I go in there, and he's got a big load of stuff under his arms. And I said, "Sir, I need to talk to you about a lease, a couple clauses for a lease." And he points, he said, "Volume, something up there. That's leases. You can take it down and read it."
Oh,
and he said, "I got to be in a traffic court 10 minutes. And he walks out, and there's nobody in there. He has no secretary. So I get up on this old chair, and I get volume. I'm thinking, there's a million things in here, but I find 2 clauses I think are relevant. And I had about 4 clauses I kind of made up. I thought were fair to each of us about insurance and this. And I took it to a girl I had dated twice who had worked for a lawyer. And I said, can you make this look official? And she laughed and she said, I'll try. And then she gives me 3 pages. And the probate is on the 3rd page. And I said, what is this? She said, that's the probate. That's where they sign. And I said, well, he only wanted 2. You can't get all this on 2? She said, no. I said, I don't think he'll accept this. She said, what do you mean? That's where you sign. I said, can't we just sign on top of page 1 or page 2? She said, no, you need this, you need a witness. And then I look, and there's his wife's name. And I said, why is his wife's name there? She said, this is South Carolina. It's a common law state, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, I don't know if he'll go. This is going to go with him. So anyway, I drive up there. He looks at it like he wants to clean something with it. You know, he's reading it, but he looks like he wants to tear it up.
Right.
I'm just standing there smiling at his wife. And she's behind the counter of this little grocerette eating a Debbie cake, little Debbie cake. And so I thought I'd get me a Yoo-Hoo, and I was drinking a Yoo-Hoo. I remember while he's looking. Finally, he signs it. And then I said, I appreciate that. I said, can I get the missus to sign it? He said, what for? Said, well, I kind of said what the lawyer told me. I said, without the missus, I said, I don't think it'll work. And he said, she don't need to know about this. Mm. I said, well, could we just ask her to sign it? So he just turns it over and just says, sign right here. And she looks at me and I smile and she signs it. And I nod. That's how I got the lease.
Oh, that's a great story. That sounds like my first listing appointment. Yeah. I think it's pretty similar.
Went about like that?
Yeah, went about like that. That is amazing. And, and how many years was that lease?
50.
50-year lease.
And the reason it was 50 is because he said, well, how long you want it? 20, 30, 40, 50. I didn't know. I was going to say 20.
Right.
That's a lifetime when you're 20.
20 years old.
And I said, I don't know, 50, sir.
Okay.
So I signed a 50-year lease.
Okay.
So I had it from 68 to 2018.
Was it 18 that long? Yeah.
Yeah.
You didn't operate till you stopped operating
in
11 or 12?
Because when he died, his wife died, I tried to get an extension of the lease.
Okay.
And I tried 10 times to get an extension, and I offered really good increases, as fair as I could be. And but his son was a little bit simple about negotiations. And all he would say was, let's wait till the last week and we'll work it out. And I tried to explain to him, you don't do that. I said, I got people been with me 30-some years, and they need to know if they're going to be here. I need to know my partner. And so I got exasperated. And at the end of 2/12, I told everybody, we got 8 months. We're going to close this day. And I just thought, I'll pay the lease. I just had enough trying to do it.
Right.
And I knew it wasn't going to work out. And I didn't want him to tell me when to leave.
Sure.
So I just
did it on your terms.
I want to leave my mom.
Yeah.
That's what I did.
Yeah. Help me understand how you run that business that long, and now Flamingo Grill along with Dino, and the employees that you've had there. I mean, there's countless and countless people like me that have worked there for summers and whatnot. But what about guys that have been there for 40 years? And, you know, why do people stay so long, Dino? And then how do you describe your leadership and kind of management style?
Well, first of all, they see I work hard. Yeah. You know, I do anything anybody has to do. Yeah. And I know how to do it. And most of the people, I didn't have any chefs. We hired people and we trained them ourselves. I did bring one cook from Dino's House of Pancakes here because he was, excuse the language, hell on wheels. He was really good.
Yeah.
And everybody else just sort of learned as we were going on. But I learned never to raise my voice at somebody, never to get in somebody's face. to take away their dignity, embarrass them, even when they were doing something really wrong. I'd try to take them to the side or later after work and talk to them. That was one thing I saw my dad do. He never embarrassed somebody, and I tried not to do that. Now, there was a few people that tested me pretty good, a couple of people you work with.
Right.
But I paid well, and I paid on time, and I gave quarterly bonuses, and I gave little raises constantly, which is a funny thing to do. But back in the days when people were making $5 an hour, $6 an hour, I would give 15-cent raises 5-6 times a year, just because I could think about you more. Yeah. You know, I'd think about Greg. Yeah, he's doing good. Give him another. Okay. And so at the end of the year, you had $1.25 raise. You know, I don't know if that helped, but I would, if people needed anything. I mean, I financed people's homes, cars, insurance. I never let anybody lose their rent, their house, ever. I mean, they knew if they were in a jam, I'd help, and I always did, and I still do.
I would describe you as very patient. I could just remember you never seemed to be in a hurry while it was chaos around us. And I think coming from being in a restaurant from when you were diapers, basically, you were used to the action going on. But it's like when you talk to me, I was the only person in the room.
Yeah. But I purposely tried to portray calmness in the clutch. Yeah. But I've always done that, you know, whether it's a catastrophe on the street or I was a gambler as a child, and I was always stoic. I was a pool player, never changed my facial expression, win, lose, miss them all. And that always helped me. Yeah. But I still try to do that. There's been a few times I might have run. I didn't know I was running. There's two people fighting over there, you know. Yeah. Other than that, I just kind of go one speed, no matter how busy it is. I try to keep everybody calmer. If they see me running and panicking, I feel like they're going to get in the weeds.
That's a leader, you know. And I tell my agents, you know, we have to be the calming voice in the transaction. A real estate transaction is very emotional, and if we're emotional, how do you think the buyer and seller are going to be?
Oh, for sure.
I think that's a great attribute that you displayed. Right. And then I know talked about the Ocean Forest Hotel. I mean, we named our company. You know, we went independent. In the not so distance past as an independent company, the Greg Sisson team and the Ocean Forest Company. And I immediately said, Stephanie, we have to have Dino Thompson on our podcast because I, as a young 15-year-old, polishing the brass doors at Cagney's every day that came right out of the hotel.
Y'all hated that.
We hated it because you clean it perfect the day before, and you can see that by 8 o'clock you look, it's covered with fingerprints. But just tell us a little bit. Let me find my notes because just tell me about the what that hotel meant here to Myrtle Beach. And I mean, there's an excerpt in there where you describe, you know, the rich and famous, and you kind of do all kinds of adjectives. I mean, what was that like in the late? Well, for you, it would have been in the mid 50s, 60s. What was it like going there on a Friday night at 9 or 10 o'clock? What was it like?
Well, for instance, like I said, I worked in the restaurant with Dad, but after the season, there was no business. Okay. So I like to have a little pocket money. So Dad would drop me off the Ocean Forest, and I was a bellhop and a busboy when I was 10 and 11 and 12, you know, during the off season. But they had conventions, and they also had the Marine Patio where all the big bands used to play. Dorsey, Woody Herman, Spike Jones, Harry James. It was that outdoor acoustically correct amphitheater under the stars where the big bands are playing. Wow. And people would dress beautifully. And the people that couldn't get in back then or didn't have the right clothes or enough money, there'd be 100 cars lined up on the beach, and people be dancing on the beach under the moonlight. You know, because the music was blowing down to the ocean.
Yeah.
So that was one of the beautiful things about the Ocean Forest. And then they also had the only theater in the round on the East Coast. Every seat was perfect. And they had some of the greatest movie stars on earth there. People don't realize how many famous people came through there. Yeah. I personally waited on, excuse me, John Ireland, John Payne, Veronica Lake, Diana Barrymore, Tallulah Bankhead, Zazu Pitts, Tuesday Weld, Burt Lahr. If you gave me a few minutes, I could name 25 more. I remember I had a little white starch jacket, you know, with these big buttons and a bow tie and a white shirt and black pants with a stripe on them. And sometimes they'd have cocktail parties after the show. Mm-hmm. And I'd walk around with canapes. I didn't know what a canapé was the first time. I knew what an hors d'oeuvre was, but they called them canapés. Okay. So I'm passing, you know, these little hors d'oeuvres. And I remember Tallulah Bankhead is standing there with one of these big, long cigarette holders. Right. And she talked darling. That's the way she talked. Yeah. And she sees me and she wiggles her finger. And I come over. I think she wants a canapé. And she says, hold out your hand. You're very cute. And I held my hand out and she dropped the ashes in my hand and said, put that somewhere. And I'm thinking, if this was on the boulevard, I would have knocked you out. You know, I just walked around and dumped it in a plant somewhere. But the Ocean Forest, this is the promotional brochure for the Ocean Forest Hotel. Yeah. The men who built this were from Greenville, South Carolina, the Woodside brothers.
Yeah, Woodside Avenue, Pine Lakes. Yeah, the Woodside family.
Right,
yeah.
And they owned 7 textile mills. One of them was the largest under one roof in the world, they said. Wow. They had a huge mill village. They built all their homes for them, and they took care of their people. They were good men. Right. But they were also visionaries. So they bought 66,000 acres, 12 miles of oceanfront, 104 square miles of land, which is essentially from Briarcliff to where we call Market Commons, a mile deep. There was no waterway then. Right. And they owned all that.
This is in the mid-20s?
Mid-20s, they bought it from Myrtle Beach Farms. Oh. And they were going to build a resort called Arcady.
Yes.
That resort, I'm going to read the first words. The prologue is written by Raymond Hood. He did all the drawings. He did all the drawings.
Was he the architect?
He was the original architect, but he didn't end up being the architect. Okay. But if you Google Raymond Hood, he was one of the finest architects in the world. And
I think he did the Waldorf Astoria.
He did Chicago Tribune building. He did the News building, the McGraw-Hill building. He was the lead designer on all 16 buildings for Rockefeller Center.
Rockefeller.
But he wrote this prologue here. He said, let me see. It's kind of beautifully written. They could write prose a lot better than we do now. But Arcady is a Greek word, which means perfect place or a haven. Okay. And that was the name. So the 4 Woodside brothers came. They hired Raymond Hood. He agreed with the project, and he drew. But they intended to build, they said, the most ambitious haven for rest and recreation in the world. So it was going to be more than extraordinary. There was going to be nothing like it.
Opulence times 10. Yeah. I mean, and you got to think mid-20s when these guys are rolling. They're the big textile. They're they're probably the richest people in South Carolina. I think I heard you say that. They were wealthy.
They were the richest people.
And then
they had the most expensive house in South Carolina.
Right.
The Woodsides. They own
and
they own a 17-story bank, and they own the Piedmont Hotel.
Yeah. And then what happened in 1929 or 30 that made things change for them?
Well, when 29 hit, they leveraged all their properties to try to save their mill workers.
Talking about the Depression.
Yeah. And they hung on to the ocean forest for a few years, but they were too leveraged, and they couldn't get permanent financing. And a few people kind of worked against them to pull the rug out from under them, and they lost everything. Their mills were taken over by Dan River, another big textile company. And the hotel was taken over by somebody, and the golf course, which was Pine Lakes Golf Course, it was called Ocean Forest Golf Course. It was 27 holes at the time.
Yeah.
And they had a beautiful stable in the back for 40 horses. They had riding trails, ski, they had hunting.
Right.
They had a saltwater pool, which was the biggest pool I'd ever seen in this area for 50 years, bigger than any pool I've seen since. And it was all tiled. The ceiling, the walls were all tiled. I remember we could sneak in there and we could talk real low and you could hear it, you know.
Yeah.
And they had a ladies' gymnasium, probably the only one anywhere around.
Right.
They had a men's gymnasium. They had an arcade with all these swanky shops on the bottom.
Yeah.
And in the rooms, they had hot, cold, and salt. You could take a saltwater bath. They also had a spigot up here where you get ice cold water all the time. And this is in the 20s.
Yeah.
You know. In the top of the ocean forest, they had a working lighthouse, which was used for navigation by ships and airplanes at the time. So it was billed as a fireproof, stormproof building because it was poured in place concrete, very unusual at the time, steel structure,
Right.
brick outside. And they had the finest crystal maker in the world, build the chandeliers from Czechoslovakia. So it was a whoop-de-doo, big to do. But they went broke and they lost everything. They lost their bank. They lost their hotel. They lost the Ocean Forest Hotel.
All that land.
They lost all 66,000 acres, went back to the county for delinquent taxes, and Myrtle Beach Farms
Got it back.
bought it back for $0.25 an acre.
Wait a minute, slow down. They paid $0.25 per acre.
To get it all back.
To get it all back.
Yeah, I think it was
Well,
$40,000 or some dollars to get it back, something like that.
And then when did they tear it down or implode? It was imploded, right?
It closed in 74 about March.
Okay.
And they imploded it Friday the 13th, September. And Hutchison Company out of Atlanta imploded it.
Okay.
And I had the two pancake houses at the time. And he walked in one. He's 6'5", and he's from Georgia. I think he played ball at Georgia. And he walked over to me and said, you own that land up on the bend, and you got a big sunken hole in it, and I want to fill it up for you. And I said, why would you want to do that? Because it cost about $35,000 worth of dirt for me to fill it up, which I didn't have. I thought someday I'll get a loan and fill it up. He said, well, I said, what are you going to fill it up with? Tree trunks, stumps? He said, no, broken brick, broken up concrete, and I'll bring some fill in and I'll grade it to your specification. And when I leave, you'll say, that's one fine man. And I laughed. And I said, why do you want to do this for me? And he said, because it'll save me hundreds of thousands of dollars because I have to take it a 60-mile round trip and wear my trucks down. Right. I said, take what? And he said, I got a contract to implode the ocean forest. That's when I heard about it. It was kind of a secret. I said, you're kidding. He said, no. And that's when we heard it was going to go down.
it is amazing. Your memory is so sharp to remember all these details. And so it's been great. I got to close this out asking, what's the next chapter in the Greek boys' life? I mean, what's next, Dino?
Oh, I don't know. I might write another book one of these days, but restaurant-wise, I'm hanging in for my staff now.
Yeah.
Like I said, I've got 5 people that have been with me almost 45 years, and I've got about 15 that have been with me 25 to 35. And I just work for them.
Yeah.
As long as I'm a little healthy, I'll hang in for them, as long as they think they want to be there. And we're lucky we still have a good staff, because now it's
tough.
Really tough for every business. Everybody's understaffed, hospitals, schools, everybody.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure why that's happening, but I still enjoy it. My dad told me as a young man, I remember I was sweeping one day, and he read something that Martin Luther King said. I can't remember the quote about sweeping. You need to Google it.
Okay.
It said, if you're going to sweep like Michelangelo and somebody else, Picasso, would sweep. Be the best you can at it. And remember, Dad, I'm thinking, where did he find that? But he was always full of these sayings.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he did tell me one day that, son, never forget, service to others is an honorable profession. So I try to impart that to people who think, I'm a waiter, I'm a bartender, I'm this. I tried to say, maybe you won't be this forever, but while you do it, just remember, it's honorable.
You've served many, many young men and women, and now not so young, that have been with you for a long time.
True.
And it was an honor for me to not only to work for you and to watch you, but for you to come here, I don't know, 30 years later, and for us to do this. And so I really appreciate you being with us today and all that you've done for our community and for all the young men and women you've
I'm
employed.
proud of you and Steph. I love seeing a great family. And that's what makes the world go round.